You'll hear advice and tips to help you figure out what the right tax role is for you, help you find it, and help you get offered the job. Who doesn't want the perfect tax role? You might already be in the right role, however, and this episode's guest, James Howell of the tax recruitment company, also shares some signs to help you decide whether you should move or stay. You're listening to episode 68 of the Tax Professionals podcast.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Deciding whether or not the right decision is to stay in your current tax job or to move to a new one can be difficult. And if you do decide to move, you then need to find your ideal role and be offered the job. All of this takes time and effort. Plus, there is so much choice and no clear place to start, and this can be overwhelming and prevent you from taking any action. James Howell, this episode's guest and a specialist tax recruiter, is here to help. It's impossible to know 100% whether the right thing to do is to move or to stay, and whether the right thing to do is accept a job offer once you've received it. However, James provides some useful insight to help you decide whether you should stay or move, and if you do want to explore moving to a new job, what you should do to make sure you're looking for the right role that fits your career drivers, find that role, and then get an offer. We also discuss whether CVs are essential in today's world, tips around creating an impactful CV, and some tips for preparing for interviews. Rough timings for each of the sections within this episode can be found in the details section within the episode within your podcast player, or by heading on over to the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP68. The link to the show notes is the only link you'll need to remember, thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP68. All of the links mentioned throughout this episode are included in there. And to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes of the podcast, head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe to sign up for email notifications. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. If you'd like to know what salary you should be on or just like a chat about your tax career, then get in touch with James. He's more than happy to have a confidential, no obligation chat where you can discuss anything at all related to work or your career. Speaking with James could help you negotiate a pay rise, decide whether to stay or move, or find the ideal role for you. Contact details for James can be found in the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP68, or you can book a chat with him by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/salary chat. So get in touch with James to benchmark your salary, discuss potentially available roles, or just have a chat related to your career. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Most people listening have probably heard your name before, of course, because you've been sponsoring the podcast now for almost a year, I think, which has obviously helped me massively. Yeah, I think it has been as well, but it's massively helped me to continue doing the podcast. So I'm grateful for that. But for people who may not have heard of you before, could you just give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do?
Sure, and just before I do that, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure to be involved in the podcast. I think what you've been doing is just been brilliant, and long may it continue. I've been running the tax recruitment company now for over 4 years, and we specialise in tax roles and helping tax professionals find the right role for them and help them progress their career and hopefully just provide good ongoing advice and support, and not necessarily, speak to them just when they're looking for jobs, but develop nice relationships where we can support them when they just want to have a chat about their career and see where they're going with it and help them wherever we can.
Don't you actually help people sometimes create plans and stuff for where they want to take their career and stuff as well?
Yeah, we have career coaching calls we have with people, and it might be as a result of that we say you shouldn't be looking to move your role for a good couple of years yet, and talk through what their career drivers are and help them understand, and hopefully get a clearer picture as to how they want to develop their career. We do also run a lot of tax technical training webinars to support our candidates, and you've kindly been involved in a couple of those where we've done some advice and help on preparing for your CTA exams and even some of the Pacific papers and things on that, which I've really enjoyed doing with you. But the likes of sort of Pete Miller, Peter Rainey, Dawn Register, some of the best tax lecturers in the country have kindly sort of helped us with those and presented some of our webinars. And we've got quite a large library of on-demand webinars that anyone listening will be very welcome to go in and have a look at and view. They don't cost anything, and there's a lot of sort of really good, I think, free tax training help and advice there for you.
Yeah, haven't you got some? I'm not sure what it's called, but it's where you like interview people about their career, a bit about 20-minute webinars and stuff.
Yeah. My career in tax, we call it.
That's
but
it.
It's we've got Susan Ball, the current president of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, is on there, and lots of Lisa Stott, who I think is now the main chair of Deloitte. So some really interesting people on there. But yeah, I think that might be a very interesting thing for you to look at as well, to see where some of the top people in tax, how they've progressed their career, and they provide tips and advice on how you could progress your career and things as well. So I've really enjoyed doing those. So yeah, you can find those on our website as well.
Yeah, I think what's good about those in particular is just seeing like how different people's careers are. I actually watched one earlier today, and they stayed at the same firm for their entire career so far and have been there for like 20 years now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. You don't have to move firms necessarily to do really well in your career. And I think I know who you're referring to there. And yeah, it's a great story. And he's, one of the most senior partners now in his firm and things. So yeah, it's nice that there's not everyone has to move to progress their career.
So with that in mind then, because I know the bigger focus for this episode is going to be on like tips and advice for people who are actually wanting to move job. But as you've kind of alluded to already, moving isn't always the right thing for people to do. So like, what are like the usual circumstances, I suppose, where someone should actually stay with their current employer? Like, when would you be advising someone to not move?
To not move, lots of reasons, really. I think if someone's not got a lot of reasons for a start as to why they're unhappy in their role, I think you should never move just for money. I think money is important for anybody, but it shouldn't be your sole reason to be moving firms. I think we like to really sort of sit down and have a good chat with our candidates about their situation and really get to understand what are the key drivers for them, but also what how they find their current role, what might be frustrating them with it, what might not be. And I think from that conversation, it becomes quite clear as to whether they're really in the right place to move or not, But I think something a colleague said to me that I think I don't know if people are probably familiar with that sort of Sunday night feeling we all get every week, where you're sort of feeling, oh, crikey, the working week's starting tomorrow, and I feel a little bit down, and the buzz of the weekend has sort of disappeared and things. And I think something a colleague said to me, if every night of the week feels like a Sunday night, then you're not in the right job, and hopefully people can appreciate what that might feel like. And that's a bit of a glib sort of thing to say, but if that's the way you're feeling, you're definitely you need to be thinking about making a career move. I think if you're starting to feel like your performance levels at work are starting to suffer and are not as high as they might have been a year before, that's often a good reason to think you might not be in the right role. And what I mean by that is perhaps you're finding like you've got less enthusiasm to perhaps do such detailed tax research or learn new things. There's definitely a sense there that you might not be that happy in your role. I think if you feel like you've learned everything you can in your current role and there's not that opportunity for you to be able to progress and develop your skills and knowledge, it's quite hard in tax because there's always stuff to be learning. But if you feel it's just you're not learning at a fast enough speed, then I think that's a sign that might be a trigger to think, well, am I in the right sort of role? I think if you feel, this is a hard one to sort of gauge and know whether, right, but if you feel there is a bit of a toxic atmosphere in your firm or your team that you just can't seem to be able to get over or find a solution for, then that's a situation that's probably not meaning you're in the right role. And I think I sort of said this just now, but I mean, it's really important, I think, if you're at the early stages of your career, and by that, I mean, possibly like the first 5 years of your career, that if you're not seeing the opportunities for you to progress, or you can't clearly see a pathway for you to be able to progress in your firm, then it might be worth starting to think, well, what other opportunities are there out there in the marketplace? I think, if the thought of a new job really excites you, gets you quite energized, then that's probably a good side as well. And what else was I going to say? And I think contradicting slightly what I said just now, I think if you just feel your pay is not improving and not improving at the rate that you sense it is improving in the market, then that would be a great time to perhaps have a chat with someone like me to get a feel for like what the sort of market rate is for pay at the moment, and get a gauge for whether perhaps your pay isn't improving or progressing at the rate it should be, and you might want to be looking at new opportunities and things. So hopefully I've answered the question there, Jack. I don't know if I went into too many different things, but I think, you know, it really, I think if you should be thinking about making a move, you should have quite a few of those things, not just one thing. I think that if I feel that's a really toxic atmosphere in your team or your firm, then that's a pretty big one, I'd say, you know. But you've got to be careful to sort of gauge how toxic it is, because sometimes it might just be you've had a bad week and it'll be fine the following week. But if that atmosphere is maintained for a long time, then that might be a sign that, you know, you're not in the right place.
If there is a problem then at your current place that's like meaning that you're not enjoying work, or there's just some issue or something, is your advice to try and solve that problem first before
Absolutely.
moving? Yeah,
absolutely. And try and talk to a line manager or someone you feel you can trust at work to see if they can help or if there are any solutions, you know. But yeah, I don't think you want to be immediately jumping ship at the first sort of sign of trouble without having tried to sort of found a solution for it and things. But if having done that, you're still not finding it's improved, then that's, I think, a massive flag that you possibly are in the wrong role and should be looking to move to another firm.
I think actually, if you jump in ship straight away whenever there's a problem, you're never going to like develop that skill to solve problems and stuff. And then as soon as the issue comes up at your next place, you're going to do the same again, and then you're going to be a job hopper.
Yeah, and that's something you don't want to be as well, you know, because we often have a lot of candidates who might come to us and have moved roles every year, 18 months, and employers just don't like that. They want people to be staying longer than that, and if they see that on a CV, it can really put them off straight away.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because usually you're going to invest a lot of time and stuff into people, and you don't want all that to go to waste by them just leaving after a few years. Just before we move on, just on the money point, because as you kind of alluded to, you did slightly contradict yourself in some way by starting with don't move just for money, but if you feel like you're underpaid, maybe consider it. So like, what's like the distinction for you then? When should you move for money then, and when shouldn't you move for money?
I think my point I was trying to make earlier is don't make money the only reason why you're looking to move. But if you feel you're being underpaid or you're not progressing in pay like you'd like to, and there's another reason why you're not happy, then you possibly are in a place where you want to look at new opportunities and things, you know.
Okay.
And I think, as I said, like, you know, we've recently completed a sort of salary survey of the market, so we've got, and that's based on like our own experiences and also other market research and stuff. So, you know, if you want to pick up the phone and have a chat with us to sort of get a gauge for where you are with your pay and your salary, we'd be very happy to do that and things, you know. But so I just think it shouldn't just be the only reason you move, but it is. I obviously realise it's an important thing for everybody, and usually when people move roles, they increase their salary fairly significantly. Not always all the time, but usually it's, you know, any move will usually result in a pay increase, which is obviously a nice thing to know and to achieve, you know.
Yeah. So kind of key career drivers then, because by the sounds of it then, like obviously money's one part of it, but really I suppose, do you advocate that people need to understand what their career drivers are so that they can actually find the role that's going to fit them and I suppose give them a job that they actually enjoy and want to work in?
Yes. Yeah. And I think this sort of, you know, comes back to what I've just said about, you know, most people, I think they're motivated by money, but they're probably not. Money is obviously important, and we need to earn good money, and it helps us to do a lot of things in our lives that we can't do if we don't have a lot of money. But I think for a lot of people, there's lots of other drivers that could be important to them. it could be work-life balance is really important to someone, being able to get back to see their children in the evening, or having a job where they're very flexible that allows them to work from home quite a lot, or finish at a certain time so they can see their children, or attend a sporting club that they might want to go to, but then they might work after that, or whatever it might be, but if they're working 15 hours a day and not able to do either of those things, that could be a real issue for them if work-life balance is very important for them. It could be, a big driver for you is how interesting and varied the tax work is in your team. Some people like to work in a tax role where they've got real general, they do lots of different types of tax work, covering lots of different types of sectors of a market, or different types of tax disciplines and things, whilst other people could be quite happy in quite a niche role and want to get very specialized in an area of tax and enjoy that as well. It could be developmental opportunities are really important for someone, whereas for someone else that might not be so important. And being in a role which is quite where they feel very safe and they know what's going to happen, and they're not necessarily looking for lots of change. They want to go in and do a good job, but they don't necessarily want to be put under the pressure of having to learn new areas of tax and develop their tax skills and stuff. Status can be quite important to some people. There's nothing wrong in that as well, by the way. And then equally, going back to what I seem to have talked about quite a lot, it could be you're very driven by money, and that's a really important thing for you. And if it is, then that can follow on what type of roles you go for, or what type of sectors of the market you might work in and things. But really understanding what it is that really motivates you and is important to you is super important, I think, then in deciding what type of roles you would look for and what would be the right type of firm for you and stuff.
I suppose maybe as well, thinking about the type of work that you want to do, you kind of alluded to a few things already, but like, for example, if you're someone that wants to do compliance or advisory work, is it one or the other? And if so, find a job that's got the right balance for you within it.
Not necessarily, no. It can be one or the other. It can be it's just purely compliance, or it can be purely advisory. But there's lots of roles where it can be a mixture of both. I think personally, it's quite good to keep your hand in both. And not just be specialised in one area. But it's entirely up to you and what you enjoy and things. But there's usually a role to suit anybody in the market in terms of what their key drivers are or what they like doing and stuff. So it's not just there's only these types of tax roles and you have to fit into those.
One of the things for me actually is like I suppose enjoyment. That's like one of my career drivers. Like, whilst I am ambitious and stuff, I still want to enjoy the work that I'm doing. So like for me, that involves having a lot of time doing either technical work, talking to clients, or like helping the more junior people to develop and stuff. And if I was to move to a role now that didn't have much of those things in it, I probably wouldn't enjoy it. So kind of knowing about those things for me is obviously important. But some people might not have enjoyment as like a driver, right? Theirs could just be completely different and purely money or purely status or purely they want to just become a tax partner or whatever it is. And they're trying to get that. So I can see why it's important to know what your drivers are and then use that to figure out whether a role is going to be the right one for you or not.
I mean, I spoke to someone this week who joined a firm that was only launched about 3 or 4 years ago, and he's absolutely loved being part of this sort of growth story and helping to build a new thing and seeing it flourish. And they're up to a team of about 50 people now, and things from starting off with 3 or 4 people. And it could be that's the sort of thing you want to be involved in, whereas other people might just want to be in a very steady, successful, but not necessarily fast growth business because they know it's not going to be too much change and they don't want too much change. And other people might love change, So it really, everyone varies, They're
very different, aren't they? Because I imagine like a firm that's growing rapidly, there's going to be a lot to do in terms of like implementing new processes, figuring things out. Whereas if you go to say like an established Big Four team, like all that process and everything's already going to be established. So if you're not interested in dealing with that stuff, Big Four could potentially be good. Whereas if you are really interested in it, then a small firm that's looking to grow is probably a better environment then, by the sounds of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say someone has got their key career drivers then. How can someone then go to figure out like what the right role is for them?
I think I know I'm biased, but I think a good recruiter can help with that a lot, because they can talk through the type of opportunities there are in the marketplace that would suit that type of situation, and they should have a good understanding of the right culture and environments and firms that would suit you and what you're looking to achieve. I think obviously there's ex-colleagues. It's quite good to always be building a network, I think, of friends and colleagues in the profession, and keeping in touch with people, because they can then share insights into what it's been like at firms they've moved to, and different types of tax roles that they've done, and that can help you to understand what might be the best place to go and work. But someone like, speaking about myself, for example, I think I worked out the other day, I think I've visited about 200 accountancy firms in the last 15 years. And I have a lot of experience of what it's like for our candidates to work at those firms, feedback from them. And that sort of knowledge can be very useful to help people understand where would be the right sort of place for them to go and things,
Yeah. I suppose like insider knowledge in a way, isn't it? Because they're not going to have, they can see the company in terms of like their websites and the type of work they do and stuff, but that's very different, isn't it, to like what the culture's going to be like to work there, which you can't really get from a Google search.
And what I wouldn't recommend is going on places like Glassdoor. Is it Glassdoor, the place that does reviews of business? Because really on there, you're only going to get people that tell you it's absolutely fantastic or tell you it's awful, because it's only the people that either love a place that will promote it or hate a place that will go on there and want to say nasty things about it, because it feels like they're, wreaking some sort of revenge on the place because they'd let them down. So I don't think they provide you with very useful feedback or objective feedback on a place. And I've had candidates that have used that in the past, and it's been quite frustrating, because I've said to them, like, you're not really getting a rounded opinion of the firm here. You're just getting people who either love it or hate it, and either aren't necessarily the right people to speak to. You want to speak to someone who's probably in the middle of the two. You get very few 3 out of 5 star reviews on those sort of places, either 4 or 5 or 1. So
yeah. And the thing is, anyway, like one team can be completely different to other team. So, you could work in one team and have a completely different experience to another team. So actually, like, I don't think it's right to look at firms as a whole anyway, because I do think it's very team-based.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah. It's really the partner you're going to be working for is really very key, isn't it? I think, and they very much set the culture and the environment you'll be working in and stuff.
So you've already mentioned like about having a recruiter then. So it sounds like you always advocate having a recruiter on hand to help with your job search.
I wouldn't say always, but I do think there's a lot of benefits to it. You might think I'd say that, but I think there are. I mean, I think a lot of recruiters have, you can find a lot of jobs on the likes of LinkedIn or some of the job boards or taxation, but not every, certainly by quite a long stretch, actually, not every job in the marketplace is advertised on those sort of places. And recruiters usually have knowledge and access to a lot more roles than you'll get from just going on those sort of job clients where, they say, look, well, if you find a good person that you think would fit in well into our team, we'll find the right role for them. So, aside from also knowing a lot more about what roles are out there, there's also situations like that. And that can be, I've placed people in some really good roles, I think, in the past where I've been in that situation and I know they've been the right fit for that firm, and they've met them, loved them. They've then loved the firm, and it's all been great. I think, as we just were talking about, I think recruiters can provide you with real insight into what it's like to work in firms and companies that you it's hard to find if you don't know someone who's worked there before, or you might just know nothing about them, and it's the recruiter can bring them to your attention and highlight why they'd be a good place to work. They can also provide you with help on putting your CV together, provide you advice on the interview process, what it would look like, give you good feedback from the interview process, an understanding of the type of people you might be meeting, probably know a lot more about the role than just you'd get from a job description or job spec. So I think that's also very important. The other thing, if you get to sort of job offer stage, a recruiter can also help in that sort of negotiation stage in terms of salary and package and things. And it's quite, a lot of people don't really like talking about that. So you can sort of leave that to the middle person, the recruiter, to sort of do that for you. And they can often help to negotiate a very good package for you because they've got that relationship with the client, and they also, understand the marketplace. And, in a lot of situations, it's a sort of independent person that's a good person to negotiate on anything, but particularly on things like salary. The other thing as well is they could just do a lot of the legwork for you, getting interviews set up, getting them all confirmed. And when you're busy at work, that might not sound much, but that's quite a lot of work to get all that sort of done. They can fill in, for a lot of our candidates, we fill in the application processes for them to save them having to do that and things as well. So there's quite a lot there, I think, that can put you at a real advantage if you're dealing with a recruiter and not just trying to do it yourself. And I think if it's a recruiter with a good reputation as well, they can help to open doors for you. I think if they've got a good relationship with senior partners in firms and talent acquisition teams and stuff, if they send your details over and recommend you to them, they're more likely to possibly want to set up an interview with you than just getting randomly a CV through a website or through an email. And they might not even see the CV if it just comes through an email and stuff, So I think that's another good reason why they're good sort of to work with and things. But that said, there's no reason why you couldn't try and do it yourself as well. And people have been often very successful doing that as well, But I think the thing as well with the recruiter though is do try and work with a specialist one, and one where you can see they've got, you might, if someone recommends a recruiter to you, that's often a good sign. But equally, try and do some research into them, have a look at them on LinkedIn. Have they got a lot of people who've put some nice comments on them on LinkedIn or on their website and things, do some due diligence on them, make sure they're the right people for you, and will give you good independent advice. And, some recruiters unfortunately do have a reputation of trying to fit square pegs into round holes. And I very much like to think that's not the way we operate. We often will say to candidates, we don't think it might not be the right time for you to look for a role at the moment. Having had a chat with you, I think you should wait a bit before doing it. We don't try and force people into going for interviews where that A, it's not right for them, or B, that they're just not interested in stuff. We won't try and persuade someone to do that. And I think that's super important if you're in recruitment. And for us, we want to work in this sector for many, many years to come, and reputation is massively important. And I think if you start trying to encourage or force people into going for roles that aren't right for them, that will come back to bite, and your reputation will get quite poor in the marketplace. And that's something we fiercely want to protect.
Yeah. One of the things I find hardest when speaking to recruiters is knowing what's like truthful and what isn't. And I think in some cases they don't even mean to not say something that's right. They just might misunderstand something and can give the wrong impression and stuff. How do you think like candidates can like best get around that to make sure that they can speak to someone who they can trust and they know that the information that they're being fed is completely truthful?
I think try and get a sense for, are they listening to you? You know, are they really trying to get to know you, understand what you're trying to do with your career, where you want to go, and if they don't appear to be listening a lot or not taking on board what you're saying, that's a bit of a red flag, and if they're presenting roles that don't really fit with your profile or what you're looking to try and do, that's a good sign they're probably not looking after your best interests and things. But it is unfortunately quite a subjective thing, isn't it? Trying to understand.
Yeah.
Someone's trying to look after you, but I think hopefully that they're two quite good signs that you might not be working with the right person. But there are an awful lot of good recruiters out there, and I think unfortunately they get bad press sometimes. But I think, looking at people that's worked in the sector for a long time, if they've worked in the sector for a long time, that's often a sign that they, are doing a good job for people and, have built a good reputation for themselves.
Yeah. You are right. I think there's just, with recruiters, I think because a few bad ones can taint the industry, and that's exactly what's happened really, isn't it? You have one bad experience and it puts you off in a way. And not everyone is like that. And it's about, I suppose, as you say, looking for almost a few of those indicators that they're going to be a good recruiter to work with. One that they're listening, which I thought was a good point, because my other half actually was considering moving at some point, and one of the recruiters she was speaking to basically told her where the job was, and she said it's too far for me to travel. But then they tried to convince her that it wouldn't take her that long to travel there every day, and she'd already told them that she didn't want to travel there. Why would you do that? They're not listening to her. So that was a good one. And I think actually you're right about the point with, if they've been working in, say, tax recruitment for 15 years, there's a reason that they've been able to do that. It's because they haven't damaged their reputation and, annoyed a bunch of candidates and clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a good recruiter will want to do the best for not just the candidate, but their clients as well. Because if they start sending them the wrong type of candidate who doesn't really want to work at a firm like that, that will put them off working for them in the future. So I think that longevity thing is a good indicator and stuff.
Would you say then, by the way, I know we talked a lot about the pros of using a recruiter. Would you say there's any cons of using a recruiter compared to doing it yourself?
I think only really if you work with the wrong one and they're trying to push you into roles that aren't suitable for you. I mean, I always say to our candidates, be yourself at interviews. If you try to be someone you're not, or try to convince people you've got knowledge in an area where possibly you don't have a lot of knowledge, and then you get the job and you've started on slightly false pretenses, you won't be happy there, and you won't be right for the role and things, but equally, that would be the only danger. If you work with the wrong type of recruiter, they try and push you into a role that's not quite right for you, then that would be a reason when possibly you're not right for they're not the right people to work with. But as I say, I think there are a lot of good people in tax that work in recruitment, and it's just making sure you choose the right ones to work with. But certainly, as I talked just now, there are a huge amount of advantages of working with a recruiter as opposed to just trying to do it yourself.
I don't know whether you've got a view on this at all, James, but obviously when a recruiter places someone, they get a commission. So the employer is essentially paying the 4 years salary to that person for the first year, and also a slice to the recruiter too. So it's almost more expensive for them to use, isn't it? Does that impact the potential salary that a candidate can get, or do you still think using a recruiter you will still get the top package, even though that commission's going? You still think they would?
Yeah, I do, and I think actually recruiters could help them get higher packages than they might have got if they hadn't used them and stuff. That the role of a recruiter is not just to find the right role for you, but hopefully get you the best possible package and things. So, and I think the tax recruitment market is very candidate driven at the moment. So firms just want good people, and if they have to pay a bit extra for the right person, then they're happy to do that, because for them it's very important to get good quality people in their team that will stay there for a long time.
Yeah, makes sense. Just a reminder that James is more than happy to have a confidential, no obligation chat where you can discuss anything at all related to work or your career. His contact details can be found in the show notes at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP68. Or you can book a call with him by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/salary chat. So then, like, over the years, like most people who work in tax anyway, I'm sure, I've had a lot of recruiters contact me about numerous jobs and stuff. And, you know, they often ask for like a CV. And I don't have close to an up-to-date CV. Like, it's been years and years since I've updated mine. And the closest thing I have to an up-to-date CV is actually my LinkedIn profile, which, to be honest, isn't even that up-to-date. It says which roles of stuff I've had, but in terms of the detail of like what I've done and what I've achieved in those roles, it doesn't have any of that stuff at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can't be bothered to update my CV. And like, are they actually essential in today's world if you were looking for a new job?
I'd say they are important, unfortunately, but I have worked with firms that would be willing just to take a LinkedIn profile, but you're not really putting your best foot forward, and you really want to, don't you? Really, to get the right role, but you know, we help people to write their CVs, and you know, there's an article on our website about how to put together your CV. It isn't as onerous and as demanding as a lot of people think, you know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, war and peace as well. I have, you know, some very senior candidates we've placed who've just have one-page CVs. You know, the key thing is just focus on your tax career. Don't talk about soft skills or quite generic skills. Or people really want to know about your tax experience, knowledge, and what type of clients you've worked on, where you've worked, type of projects you've worked on, you know. And I think people will look at a CV for 1 to 2 seconds and decide within that period whether they want to read the rest of the CV and whether that candidate's of interest. So super important, the first half of your CV, first half page, is really focused on what makes you a great tax professional. What's the tax work have you done that, you know, what have you specialized in? What do you have a lot of experience in? You know, and don't put, you know, I actually say don't put loads of stuff about like your education and stuff right at the start or where you live. Just get straight into that tax bit, you know, and obviously highlight the fact if you're CTA qualified or AAT or ATT qualified or whatever it might be, that's good to chuck in right at the start. But, you know, how many GCSEs you've got or Duke of Edinburgh awards you've got and stuff, all great stuff, but it won't win you a tax job, you know. It's cream on top of the cake, but you want it's the meat of the cake you really want to get on there and things, you know.
I don't fancy trying your meat cake, James. Doesn't sound appetizing, but I know what you mean.
And I often say to people, like, if you can, just brain dump on a page what your working week will often look like, you know, and the types of projects you work on, and then send that over to us and we'll help finesse and get that looking like it needs to look. But that's really what a CV is all about. But, you know, don't put in 20 lines about your job at McDonald's when you were 16. You know, it's just, it's not going to help. You know, it's all about the tax experience and things.
Yeah. I suppose really it's thinking about like what that person who's recruited for the role wants to see. Like, what do they want to know and what are they not going to care about, right? And it's put all that stuff they're going to care about right at the top.
Yes, absolutely. You know, and it's nice to put like what your hobbies and interests are, and you know, the fact you might have a Duke of Edinburgh, well, that's great to have on there, but have it towards the end, you know, because that's gonna that stuff is not what's gonna get you in through the front door and sat down for an interview and things, you know.
One of the things actually that puts me off when I look at CVs for people is if I feel like they're completely exaggerating something. So I think this probably happens more with graduates than it does with people who become more experienced and senior. But like, I've seen plenty of grad CVs that say something like, oh, I've got strong leadership skills because I was captain of the football team. And I just think, but you haven't got strong leadership skills that have you, and that is not going to be like transferable to the workplace and you're coming in at the bottom, you've got to like be humble and, you know, all these things that you need to be as a tax trainee, I think, to get the most out of it. Like, it puts me off straight away. Is there any other things that you think people should like avoid doing on their CVs?
I think you've hit what you've just said, Jack, is so important. You know, it's just don't focus on soft skills and generic skills. I don't put things like I'm really hardworking, I'm really well organized. I love working in a team. All that is taken as read. They expect you to have that. That doesn't make you stand out from another candidate, because, you know, if someone then is, you know, they might be comparing you to someone who's put, well, I've got 4 years experience in tax, I'm nearly CTA qualified, I've worked on these type of corporate tax projects. You know, that person's going to be far more attractive than someone who says they work well in a team and they're hardworking and have strong leadership skills because they were the rugby team. You know,
it is a thing that puts me off straight away every time I see it. Any form of exaggeration, to be honest. I think that's because though I value honesty. It might be different for the people who are recruiting people, but I like honesty. And if I get the sense that they're not being honest on the CV, then I just don't think I'd work well with them, because if I get the sense that they can't just feed me honest information, it puts me off.
Yeah, and I think you're very similar to most tax leaders, Jack, in that, you know, they as soon as they spot anyone who might be trying to pull the wool over their eyes, they just don't like that at all, you know. But what I would say is very experienced tax professionals will still come to us with CVs that are a bit like we've just talked about and not focused on their tax experience. So don't feel if you've done that's just inexperience. Unfortunately, you will get quite experienced people that will do that, you know, and I guess that's, you know, going back to why you should talk to a recruiter. A good recruiter will pick you up on that and help you with that and help you to get a CV that looks right, and will put your best foot forward.
What do you think about, what's your view on putting like figures on your CV? So by figures, I mean, like, let's say you've won a certain amount of work in a year out of the team's overall amount, or if you've managed a certain percentage of the team's work in that year. Are those things good to put on, or would you keep them off?
No, very good. And like the size of the portfolio you might manage is really good to have on there. And, you know, I think because it adds a lot of credibility to what you're saying then and things, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's really good to include on there.
And any specific achievements? Because I imagine, by the way, like if you're looking for an employment taxes person, there's going to be a lot of people out there that have like worked on a broad range of employment tax projects. How can they like make themselves stand out from, say, other candidates?
I think, if you've won any awards, obviously that's fantastic to put on there. If you've qualified very quickly, that's very good to put on there. If you've got very high marks in one of your CTA exams, that's very good to put on there. But I think in terms of like outside of that, I think, putting some really good examples of the type of clients you've worked with, the type of projects you've successfully completed, where you might have been set a task by either a client or a manager to complete, and you've completed it very successfully. If you've won, I suppose going back to awards, if you won any internal awards or, you know, been voted, you know, employee of the month or whatever it might be, that's good stuff to have on there and things as well, you know. But yeah,
because I think if you can get it on there, like results are probably better than say just the activity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know, let's say in like I've worked on all these projects. Maybe you could say like I delivered a project that was a 50 grand project and the client gave us great feedback at the end of it. It's probably better than just saying I've worked on this type of project before.
Yes. Yeah.
What about covering letters then? Because I feel like covering letters are a thing of the past personally, but can they be helpful?
They are. I think, you know, I think it's good to, you know, if you're going to apply for a role yourself, you know, often you would fill in your details via a portal, and there will be the option of saying something about yourself. But I would sort of keep that fairly brief to 4 or 5 sentences, because it should be your CV that really speaks for you in terms of your experience. But it would be nice to give a sort of summary of yourself, but again, focus on your tax skills and experience, not on generic soft skills and and things, But yeah, I think long covering letters are a thing of the past now. People are just so busy, they make decisions very quickly on whether they want to interview someone and stuff. So, all this work you're doing on your CV is important because you've got to put your best foot forward, but they won't spend, long times reading it. They'll just make a decision fairly quickly as to whether you're the right person. And perhaps if there's a very long covering letter, their concern might be, well, does this person manage their time well? And, is there do they just put too much detail almost into things sometimes? And stuff,
Can they get to the point quick enough?
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Which is obviously important with clients when you're working with clients that are non-tax people and don't want all the stuff around the edge, so they just want to get to the important stuff.
Yes.
So interviews then. I remember when I graduated actually, and I was starting to look for my first job after university. Like, I used to spend loads of time doing some things which in hindsight were pointless and a waste of time. Like, for some reason, I was really obsessed with finding like who the competitors were and trying to understand like all the services that a firm offers. And obviously if it's someone like a Big Four, like that list of services is ridiculous and you never got to remember it and talk about it. And I know from my side anyway, when I interview people, like I'm not interested in if they know who our competitors are, or I'm not interested in if they know every single service that the firm provides, but I want them to understand like our team, for example, and what we do for people. Yeah. So like in terms of like preparing for interviews, like what should people focus on, and do you have any like specific tips at all?
Yeah, I think it's very important you have at least looked at the website of the firm and show that you have an understanding a bit about them and what they might specialize in and where they're located and perhaps, how many partners are on the firm. But don't go in and go, all right, notice you've got 17 partners, 4 offices, and, trying to sort of show off almost the knowledge that you've gained. It's just, I think, they might say in an interview, yeah, we've got 6 offices. Yeah, I noticed that on the website. Yes. And just sort of without being over the top, show that you have done some research. I think people do like that. I say to all our candidates, a really good thing to do for interview is to think of 3 bits of tax work that you're really proud of that you've done over the last year, and try and pick areas that you have good experience and knowledge in. Don't pick a sort of quite obscure area of tax that you've never worked in apart from that one project, because there's a good chance someone will say in an interview, tell me a bit about the type of work you've done. And if you haven't prepared in your mind some examples of some of the work you do, you can sort of dry up an interview. And if you they ask that question, you go, oh, let me have a think. And you can't, you dry up. That doesn't look very good. But if you can go, well, actually, I did a really interesting piece of work just last month on, a capital allowance claim or an R&D tax credit or whatever it might be, and you talk it through a bit and stuff, that's great. And if you made sure you've picked areas where you have quite good knowledge, they'll almost certainly try and test your knowledge a little bit. And because you've chosen an area that you have pretty good knowledge and understanding, and you should be able to answer any technical questions there quite well and stuff, we provide a lot of interviews now are done over Teams or Zoom and things, not the whole process, but first, and they're different types of interviews to do. So it's quite important things to sort of think about with that. Little things like making sure your computer's in the right place of a room. It's not right, not with a window right behind you so they can't see you, or it's at a wrong level. So they might be looking up your nose when you're doing your interview and things. But there's lots of different things to possibly think about there that is important. What else? I think I think just be yourself though. Don't try and be someone you're not at an interview. And if you're yourself and they like you, then there's a good sign that it's the right role and firm for you. But if you try and be someone you're not, which is what some people try and do in interviews, then that will be, you probably won't come across very well. And if you do come across well in their eyes, it won't be the right role for you because you've tried to be someone you're not. So no,
and then you can potentially not even meet their expectations when you start. I'm sure you've had experiences of people being placed and then being fired, I suppose, or let go before their probation's even finished.
Well, thankfully not.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good.
Because I like to think we put people forward for the right roles for them, and we've also vetted the people properly for the candidate, the clients. But that may have happened to people in the past, obviously, but no, thankfully we haven't had that.
So do you have any advice, James, for people who have actually got to offer stage, so they've got an offer on the table and maybe they're having second thoughts as to whether like the job is the right job for them, or maybe it is and kind of the client knows it is, but they're getting cold feet about it? Like, what advice do you have for them in that position?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you're never going to be 110% certain it's the right move. There's always going to be a few small doubts in your mind. So don't get unnerved by that, because it's always a big change, and change is always something that, most people find reasonably difficult to feel completely comfortable with, So I think really, if you're in that situation, it's so important you speak to an independent person or mentor, not just your sort of, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, mum and dad, but someone perhaps in the profession who respect, and just talk to them about how you're feeling, what your concerns are, and just make sure you're not just going through what most people do when they move jobs. There's those few little elements of doubt, because you're going through change, and change is always a little unsettling and things. If though, having done that, and then you still feel like, I don't feel completely comfortable with this, it might be it isn't the right move for you at that time. And what I really recommend is that if you decide that you're not going to go ahead with a job, you just tell people in the right way. Both if you're working with a recruiter, that's very important, or if you're, if you're working directly with a company, you tell them, or firm, you tell them in a nice way, and you don't burn bridges. I've had candidates that have just sort of said, "Sorry, I don't want the job anymore," and then won't take your calls or speak to you about it, or give you any feedback. And that, as a recruiter, that makes you feel a bit fed up, because you put a lot of time and effort into that person. But it's a bit embarrassing for you with the client, because you can't then really explain what the problem is, and it leaves you thinking, well, I'm not sure I'd want to work with that person again. And that firm probably thinks, well, I won't think we'll want to offer that person a role because of that. And that person recruiting in that firm might be in another firm in 5 years' time, and that might stop you. Your reputation wouldn't be then great with that firm as well, So if you do decide, there's nothing wrong in changing your mind, but just do it in a nice professional way and with respect for people and things. But definitely just don't rush a decision like that, and make sure you talk to people about it, and make sure you really are making the right decision, and you're not just getting a few butterflies because you're about to experience change, and change is often a bit unsettling and different. Change, though, can be hugely exciting and very energizing as well. So, it's not something also to be worried about. It can be just absolutely brilliant and really make you very, very happy and fulfilled in your career and things.
Yeah, I suppose on the flip side as well, then actually, like, don't feel forced into accepting it just because you've got to the offer point. Like, if you accept it knowing it's not the right thing for you, you're just gonna make a mistake for you, and it's a mistake for the firm that's hiring you as well. So yeah, don't be scared to change your mind. I think on top of obviously doing everything that James just said about being courteous and doing it in the right way, if you do want to say it, the best thing to do is to say it.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, Jack, as well. I think the firm would rather know at that stage than 2 months into you starting the job, when they've invested a lot of time and things into you and stuff, But so hopefully that helps on that as well.
So, James, if people want to learn more about you or get in touch, like, where's the best places for them to go?
Well, I think if you go to our website, it's very easy to remember the web address. It's taxrecruitment, all one word, .co.uk. There's lots of advice on our website in terms of preparing for interviews, thinking about your career, what are you thinking about your career drivers and things, all those webinars I talked about. So there's a lot of useful resource on there anyway for you, but all our contact details are on there. And we always really like to try and have a chat with you first before we start looking at roles and what roles are right for you. Because, you know, it's just so important to understand what you're really looking for and what will make you happy. And you can't do that just from looking at a LinkedIn profile, I don't think, you know. And hopefully by chatting to us, you can get a lot of useful information and actually help you to sort of think about what you're really looking for and what will make you happy in your career and fulfilled in your career. I think one thing I would say is it's a great time at the moment to be looking for new opportunities. I've never known there'd be so many opportunities in the market and so many different and varied opportunities, which means that, you know, there's whatever you're looking for, there's almost certainly going to be a tax role that would suit you and stuff. And there's a lot of demand for good people. So if you feel ready to make a move and things, it really is a very good time to be doing that at the moment.
Show notes for this episode are at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP68. All the links mentioned throughout the episode are included in there, including James's contact details so that you can get in touch with him. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes of the podcast, head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe to sign up for email notifications. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you found the episode useful and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop and improve your tax career. Until next time.